Well, we never thought it would happen, but it finally did. The bells of Notre Dame rang in the West End. Now, I have a lot I want to discuss, not even just about the concert itself, but about so many things beyond. But let's start with a little bit of history. We didn't ever expect the Hunchback of Notre Dame to be able to come to the West End, even for something as brief and as short as this. It's felt, looking a little bit more behind the scenes, that Disney don't really know what to do with Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's a very dark musical, with a lot of material that could be seen as outdated. And even if you want to look past some of that, and look past some of the attitudes of the piece, it's a lot darker than the musicals that Disney typically put on, so they can't really market it to the same type of audience. Because of that, and despite very successful productions in America and Germany, we have never seen professional productions of The Hunchback of Notre Dame in the UK. Until last weekend, when the concert production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame opened at the Prince Edward Theatre, currently home to MJ. This concert has been so successful that they added an extra matinee performance, and then they added extra performances the week after, which shows there is a certain demand for Hunchback in the UK. So, what did I think? I saw the concert, I was fortunate enough to see it. Let's talk about the concert, let's talk about some discussions with casting, and let's look forward to the future. Is there a life beyond this concert for the Hunchback of Notre Dame in London, or in the UK as a whole? Let's discuss. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie, I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do versus brackets, rankings, game shows, and so much more. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. But let's dive in to The Hunchback of Notre Dame. So I think the right place to start is fairly positively, and speaking about the concert itself, because on the whole, I did enjoy it. I do think a lot of that is the simple fact of it's just really nice to finally be able to hear this material live. If you have somehow missed what the Hunchback of Notre Dame is, and you're watching this video with no recollection of what it is, or don't even know the film itself, the Hunchback of Notre Dame is based on the Victor Hugo novel, which then was the inspiration for the Disney film, which came out during the Disney Renaissance. The musical version actually dates back to 1999, where it first premiered in Berlin and became one of the longest running musicals there. It wasn't called The Hunchback of Notre Dame, it was translated to German, which is Der Glockner von Notre Dame, which is cute. This was only 3 years after the film came out, but it took quite a while for it to eventually make its way to the States, premiering in California in 2014. It's important to note that the tone of the musical is a lot darker. If you've seen the adaptation of Anastasia, which isn't a Disney film, but has a very similar style of animation to Disney, and now Disney technically own it because they bought Fox, who made it, so you can't say it's not a Disney film anymore. It's really weird, but Disney didn't make that one. But you're kind of looking at a similar approach to bring it to stage, where they take a lot of the darker elements that were kind of hinted to in the film and expand on that, giving it a more grounded tone. Because of that, however, it kind of has a weird contrast to a lot of other Disney musicals that are much more family friendly, that are much more commercial. It tends to match the novel's tone much more than the tone of the film. And because of that, I feel like Disney have kind of stepped away a little bit from this. So I'm honestly just pleased that we actually have it at all. Even if this is a fleeting moment and this is all that we can get, at least we had something. Because I think it's a difficult task to bring this to stage. You want the flashiness, you want the spectacle, but I think what really works about Hunchback in a concert production is the fact that the music is kind of a huge part of the sell. Because we've been waiting so long for this, and because that music is so iconic, it actually really matches a concert production. These orchestrations made by Alan Menken absolutely soar, especially with this orchestra. It sounded absolutely gorgeous. And I was like towards the back. I was up in the gods for this one. So if it's translating up there, I can't imagine just how powerful it would have been down below in the stores. This beautiful, punchy music, orchestrated with the huge sound it absolutely deserves, because I think that's what shines so much about Hunchback's score. It's so expansive and so detailed and complex. It's just such a treat to be able to hear this material. It's just such a treat to be able to see it performed with such an amazing cast. I think it's such a treat to see it expanded on and grown and be on a West End stage. I think, above everything, that's what this did right. And when you're advertising something as a concert version, I think that's the thing to get right. That's not to say that this concert version didn't have limitations. I think a lot of that comes in some of the spectacle of the piece, and looking at a book which deals with a lot of different set pieces that you can't really do massively well. It's weird, because when you're looking at these concert productions, nowadays you don't really know what you're going to get, because a lot of these in-concert shows have been going for we're just going to be a fully staged production. Death Note was basically a fully staged production. A lot of these like new musicals that are trying themselves out in concert version are practically fully staged as well, like Figaro was. Full on sets for one night only shows. And I think when you're a little bit spoiled like that, it kind of does feel weird to go back to what honestly they probably should be if they're calling themselves in concert. It's not to say the staging is bad at all, and I think what they managed to do is very suited to what they're advertising themselves as. They had a couple of benches on stage, these very church-like pews, which were moved around effectively to create these different spaces, and even propped up on their sides to create doorways in certain scenes. But on the other hand, you have a lot of these huge spectacle sequences that are just kind of having to be thrown out with narration, which does allow the story to keep on track, but there's certain moments where it does feel really lacking, like in certain character deaths that we get, which is often highlighted with a spotlight on the character, which takes a little bit of time for you to really click what's actually going on. It's a nice creative touch, but I feel like there's additional staging that could have been used in those moments to form a stronger connection, especially when they're not using handheld mics. So you can have that extra bit of staging. There's certain moments where I just feel like I wish they'd just given it an extra element to it. Times where it's kind of being stripped back and stylized in a way where you're not really seeing the limitations of why it needs to be like that, so you probably could just stage it more normally. Even if you also want to have your fun spotlight to represent things, you can have that as well. This is probably a situation where they could have their cake and eat it too, and sometimes I'm not sure if they did. But I think it's very easy to forgive a lot of that when you're hearing that beautiful music, and when you're getting performances from this amazing cast. I want to start with a couple of cast members who I just feel like are perfect casting for any production of Hunchback. Like, if we were getting a full stage production of this musical, these are the people you would get for that. Zachary James is incredible. We are continuing the pipeline of Hades actor going into the role of Frollo. Patrick Page having originated the role of Frollo and originated the role of Hades, and Zachary James being part of the first West End cast of Hadestown, playing the same role. I have to say that because technically Patrick Page originated the role here, because he played the role at the National Theatre back in 2019, but then when the show came to the West End, then it was Zachary James. Got it? Get it? Good. Zachary James has so much power as Frollo. He is an absolute treat for an actor. This is the type of role you want. He is so complex. There's so many layers. He's not just like brooding evil. You have a lot of additional character journey and growth behind that. But the actions he takes everything one step too far. He's completely tempted and bewitched by his own urges, and he sees that and blames everyone else. And so much of that oozes out of Zachary James' performance here. The way he holds himself, the way he looks down on people. These glimpses, these tiny little moments of humanity that might be behind it. Honestly, one of the best things that the Hunchback musical does is expand on Frollo's story by taking a villain who is great and somehow making him even better by giving extra complexities, by adding into that backstory. And even if you know how it's going to go, if you know how it's going to play out, there's that tiny little glimpse behind you, that thought and that hope that maybe it will click that what he's doing is wrong. That's what makes for a great villain, and so much of that comes through Zachary James' performance. Again, if they do a full production of this musical, I would love to see him come back. Christina Aladu is everything I want in an Esmeralda. Esmeralda is a wonderful character because there's so much care and compassion there. The relationship she builds up with all of these different characters just tells you so much about her. Her relationship with Frollo and his sliminess and his attitudes and how she challenges him on that. Being able to speak up and speak for herself. The relationship she has with Quasimodo. Trying to make him feel included, and when that backfires, realizing what she's done wrong and trying to make it up for him. The care and compassion that she shows to him, those basic human dignities that he often isn't shown. This glimpse into the world out there that Quasimodo might actually be accepted in. And the relationship with Phoebus. And the love story that blossoms there. There's so many different character dynamics and different intricacies that tell you so much about her. She is caring, she is compassionate, and so much of that carries through Aladu's performance here. These little moments of care, these little moments of connection, as well as having some of the best vocals on that stage. Oh my god, her rendition of God Help the Outcasts, unforgettable. Dex Lee, who plays a really great Phoebus, this character who is racked with their duty and their own moral backbone, and having to pick between these two. Dex Lee's performance really highlighting a lot of these themes here, and exploring this character in so much depth. And there's a great supporting performance here from Adam Strong. Strong plays Clopin, who is another traveller as part of Esmeralda's group, who gives us that first look into that community in a song like Topsy Turvy. A really lovely performance here. But you'll notice I've missed two people out, and that is Ben Joyce and Oliver Hewing, who share the role of Quasimodo. Now, this is where we're going to transition a little bit into speaking about some of the controversial casting of this concept production. I will share my feelings on it in a little bit, but I'm going to start with how they present this in the production itself. In terms of how they stage it, with Ben Joyce being an able-bodied actor and Oliver Hewing being a deaf actor, they split the role, with Ben Joyce taking up the main duties of Quasimodo, and Oliver Hewing kind of acting like a shadow. It's a nice idea that it feels like they didn't really have enough rehearsal time to really flesh out. Quasimodo is not just a disabled character within physicality, but is also canonically deaf. That is something that the material of the show still addresses and still clarifies. So it is nice to have that representation on stage, but they decide to do it with this shadow who signs certain words. Mark Smith, who works a lot with deaf performers, provides this choreography and bakes BSL into it, but oftentimes it feels like these are very random words that are being pulled out. And quite often, especially in the scenes of the piece, Oliver just ends up kind of sitting towards the side, which sadly does make it feel like he was a little bit of an afterthought, which should not be the case for a character who is disabled, for a character who could provide a real moment of representation. And that's my problem with this, because it feels very much like a decision that's kind of trying to skirt around the criticisms that come with casting Ben Joyce as Quasimodo. And while I could say many amazing things about Joyce's performance, his vocals are incredible. He performs it really well. He has a certain childlike energy to him that really suits the role. The fact of the matter is, he probably shouldn't be cast here. This, I feel, was a great opportunity to give us some very authentic disabled casting. Because if we look across the West End, there's so few shows that give us the opportunity to do this. So few disabled roles actually get to be authentically played by disabled actors. And as someone who is constantly pushing and fighting for trans representation and for queer representation and authentic representation within that, it would feel wrong of me not to address this in any way, because I don't think it's right. I like the idea they present here, but if you're going to handle it like this, I wish Oliver was the one who was highlighted a lot more. If Ben Joyce just performed the role vocally, I think this idea would have worked a little bit more. I don't think it fully wipes out the casting of an able-bodied actor in this role, but it would have put a lot more emphasis on the disabled actor. It would have put a lot more emphasis on that representation. And I think this is especially felt when you're seeing comments after the fact, and when I was looking at responses from the concert, I saw a lot of people moaning and complaining that Ben Joyce wasn't acting disabled. I saw a lot of people saying, oh, I wish he was more hunched. I wish that they played up the physicality more. And that feels really disrespectful to people who live with a disability. I think this decision was certainly something to try and mitigate some of the criticisms here, and I do think in certain elements it did. To have some kind of disabled representation on that stage was important, but I don't think it was as effective as it could be. I don't think it was as authentic as it could be. And while these are two very committed performances, two very good performances, I still think at the end of the day, the focus in this presentation was still more on the able-bodied actor. We've seen deaf actors taking on this role be done very successfully before. There was the production in America, which has Joshua Castile in the role. But this decision felt like it didn't have enough time to fully be developed. So much so that people were coming out of it and questioning it. And I feel like that's such a shame, because I don't think it achieved the representation that it wanted to. With people questioning why it was even done in the first place, and still people asking for the able-bodied actor to play it more disabled. And I feel like moments like this and controversies like this is part of the reason that Disney probably doesn't want to touch this musical very much. There have been disabled people who have spoken about this with a more personal perspective, who have spoken about this with far more depth and complexity than I ever could. And I think in moments like this, when they're the people being brought into question, they're the voices to listen to. With all that said, let's look at the future of Hunchback in London. Because for all of its shortcomings, these are all things that can very easily be adjusted. The casting of an actor can be adjusted, staging can be adjusted. And I think what this concert has shown is there is a clear want for Hunchback in London. There is a clear nostalgia for this material, and there is clearly a slightly older millennial audience who have fallen in love with this material and want to see it performed on stage. The biggest thing holding it back is most likely Disney. And I think it's kind of fair to say that this would be a very different show to market than something like Hercules, Frozen, Lion King, Mary Poppins. These very family-friendly shows that Disney is known for. Hell, we can even highlight the fact that if you look at this, the Disney logo doesn't appear on this marketing at all. The first mention of Disney that you can find is on this page, where it says that the musical is based on a novel by Victor Hugo with songs from the Disney film. They have kind of distanced themselves from this musical much more than they have with other things. If you look at the logos for Hercules, Mary Poppins, all of these shows, they all have Disney very prominently attached. It feels like Disney theatricals as a whole kind of want to distance themselves from this material. So I think if Hunchback comes to London in a full production, I think there's going to be a case where we're looking at an off-West End run, where we're looking at maybe a less commercial run. I don't think this is going to be something they want to open immediately into the West End. I don't think this is something that would have a full production there. The other reason we could look at of maybe why Disney doesn't want to be massively attached to this is some of the attitudes of the piece. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about the controversies this has already had around disabled casting. We can also look to the material and some of the attitudes it has towards travellers and Romany people, which makes sense for a historical piece, but are maybe not things that Disney want attached to their brand. But, I mean, we didn't even think that this concert would be possible. If we could get this concert off the ground, there is a world where maybe we could see a full production of Hunchback in the UK. And when I say this, I do mean specifically professional production. The amateur rights to Hunchback in the UK have been available for a while. But if we're going to see a full professional production of Hunchback, the other problem with going small is we can't go too small. Why? Well, parts of the whole appeal of Hunchback and part of the whole appeal of this show is the music. That's why a concert production actually worked quite well, because a lot of the want from this production was about the music and hearing that score in person. And hearing that music performed, you do need quite a big orchestra to give the music that impact. So we can't really say, take this to a venue like The Other Palace or Southwark Playhouse. Like, these venues feel too small. And the weird thing is we don't really have a great in-between in London. You want a space where you can have a little bit of spectacle. Especially with a lot of these huge sequences that it has. The bells in that bell tower climbing up it. There's so many iconic imageries in this musical that you want a slightly bigger space to create it. So it's this kind of push and pull, where you don't want to go too commercial because it might be a harder sell and you've got to advertise to an audience that Disney aren't really massively wanting to advertise to, which is, you know, teens and millennials and, you know, I guess I'm Gen Z, so I guess Gen Z also fits in there too, like the 16s to 25 to 30 demographic. You could probably up that to 35. Yeah, up it to 35. I have two suggestions. I don't know how viable either of these would be, but if we're going to go to a venue that is more known for being a little bit non-commercial, then we could maybe say somewhere like the Old Vic. The Old Vic actually do tend to take a lot of musicals that have similar vibes to something like Hunchback. Slightly off-kilter musical choices. I mean, Groundhog Day. Who would have thought a Groundhog Day musical would work? The Old Vic did, and they were right. I feel like that venue has a lot of beauty behind it and would really match some of the vibes of Hunchback, as well as having a fairly big stage for them to mount a lot of the bigger spectacle sequences in the show. My other suggestion would be looking past any theatre and trying something more site-specific. Let's do Hunchback in a cathedral. No one has thought of that idea ever. But it might be the case where if we want to have Hunchback in the UK, a venue like that might be better, doing it a little bit more site-specific. My other suggestion, which would mean that the show would have to be Actor Muso, but we could try something a bit more regional. And I think a great venue that could actually do the Hunchback of Notre Dame quite well is somewhere like the Watermill. The Watermill have been doing a lot of musicals recently where they like to take the audience outside. They recently did it with Jesus Christ Superstar. They did it a couple of years ago with their production of The Lord of the Rings. But a lot of the vibes of that venue kind of match Hunchback. It's kind of going in a very opposite direction of shrinking it massively because the size of the Watermill is tiny. But I feel like it's a space where the intimacy of it carries a lot of weight and a lot of power. So there would have to be compromises in some of the scale, but the space itself naturally feels quite matched to a lot of the tone and the style of Hunchback. If you look how they staged Jesus Christ Superstar, or even how they staged Lord of the Rings, the kind of vibes of that space naturally suit the kind of darker and almost dingier tone of Hunchback. But obviously that is a venue that has a lot of limitations in size, and they wouldn't be able to get loads and loads of spectacle. And also there's no space for a band, so like with their other musicals, it would have to be Actor Muso. But I do think that's what we're looking at when we're looking at potential for Hunchback. I don't think this is a show that would be able to go into the West End immediately. I do think there's a world where it could do very well off, or even regionally, and then make its way into the West End. But I think they're going to be quite hesitant with it. And that's if we even see any more movement at all. If we don't, it's nice that we got to have Hunchback in the first place. It is nice that we got to see a production of it and enjoy the music, even with some of the shortcomings of this production. So, what do you think? Did you see the concert version of the Hunchback of Notre Dame? What did you think? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps the channel. Here's some links to some other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you'd like to drop me a follow over there. And a huge thank you to all of our channel members who support everything I do over here. But that's it for me today, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye!